Hey guys, tonight we're going to step back in time, far beyond the comforts of your modern kitchen, and explore a truly unsettling aspect of medieval life, the disturbing diet of a besieged castle's inhabitants. Imagine being trapped within stone walls, watching your food supplies dwindle, and knowing that survival means confronting hunger in its most brutal forms. It's not for the faint of stomach, I can tell you. And spoiler alert, you're probably not going to want seconds on any of these dishes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are a humble guard standing watch on the parapets of Castle Blackwood, a formidable stone fortress nestled deep within the rolling forested hills of what would one day become upstate New York. It's late autumn, and the air bites with a crisp chill that promises a harsh winter. For weeks now, the familiar peace of the countryside has been shattered by the distant glint of steel and the ominous rumble of siege engines. Lord Edmund, your liege, a stern but just man, had gathered his people soldiers, servants, and the surrounding villagers within the castle walls when the banners of the invading Duke Valerius first appeared on the horizon. The gates were barred, the drawbridge raised, and the great castle, usually a bustling hub of life, transformed into an island of desperate hope. At first, there was a sense of grim determination. You had ample stores, or so you believed. The granaries were full of wheat and oats, the larders stocked with salted meats and dried fish, and the cellars boasted barrels of ale and wine. You remember the initial days, the reassuring sight of loaves of fresh bread, albeit rationed, and thin but warm stews. Morale, though strained, was holding. You'd gather with your fellow guardsmen for meager meals, swapping nervous jokes about the besiegers outside. They'll get tired and go home soon enough, someone would say, and you'd nod, trying to believe it. But weeks bled into a month, then 2. The enemy showed no signs of retreat. Their campfires twinkled ominously in the distance each night, a constant flickering reminder of your predicament. The initial confidence within Blackwood began to erode, slowly, insidiously, like rust on an old blade. The first noticeable change was the bread. It became coarser, made with more bran and less refined flour. The stews grew thinner, the chunks of meat diminishing into mere specks, then disappearing altogether. You find yourself standing guard, your stomach rumbling with a hunger that is no longer a fleeting annoyance, but a persistent ache. The cold wind seems to cut deeper, and your armor feels heavier than usual. You try to focus on the distant enemy lines, but your mind keeps drifting back to the last meal, a thin gruel made from oats, flavored with a pinch of stale herbs. It was barely enough to keep the chill at bay, let alone satisfy the gnawing emptiness within. You recall your grandmother's Sunday feasts, piled high with roasted meats and rich pies, a memory that now seems like a cruel, impossible dream. The daily rations, once delivered with a semblance of order, now come with hushed urgency. The quartermaster, a usually jovial man named Bartholomew, has grown gaunt, his eyes shadowed with worry. He now personally supervises the distribution, ensuring every portion is precisely measured, every crust accounted for. You hear the whispers among the castle folk. The grain stores are lower than Lord Edmund lets on. The salted pork is nearly gone. These aren't just rumors. You see the evidence with your own eyes. The shrinking piles in the storerooms, A common historical fact about medieval sieges is that starvation was often a more effective weapon than direct assault. Besieging armies understood that if they could cut off supplies, the defenders would eventually weaken, surrender, or be too malnourished to put up a fight. This strategy, known as attrition warfare, saved the besiegers' lives and resources. However, a lesser-known detail is that the psychological impact of impending starvation often broke morale faster than the physical effects. The constant worry about food, the visible dwindling of supplies, created an atmosphere of pervasive dread long before acute malnutrition set in. Historians still debate the exact psychological tipping point in a siege. At what point does hunger become so overwhelming that surrender, even to a hated enemy, becomes preferable to continued suffering? You remember a particularly cold night, standing watch, when a younger guard, a fresh-faced lad named Thomas, collapsed from weakness. He hadn't eaten properly in days, having given most of his meager portion to his ailing younger sister, who was among the villagers sheltering within the castle. Lord Edmund, seeing the boy, had personally offered him a small piece of dried venison, a rare luxury. The gesture, though kind, was also a stark warning. If the Lord himself was sharing his limited personal stores, the situation was truly dire. The castle cook, an old woman named Agnes, once renowned for her hearty stews and delicious pastries, now presides over empty cauldrons. The rich aromas of roasted game and simmering vegetables have long since vanished, replaced by the faint, lingering smell of desperation. Her face, usually ruddy and cheerful, is now pale and drawn, her hands trembling as she stirs the watery gruel. You notice her furtively collecting scraps, even the dried husks of grain, anything that might be added to the next day's meager offering. It's a subtle shift, but one that speaks volumes about the deepening crisis. The animals within the castle walls, the few remaining chickens, a scrawny pig. Lord Edmund's beloved hunting dogs are no longer seen roaming freely. Their numbers dwindle day by day. You try not to think about it, but the sudden absence of their familiar sounds, the occasional glimpse of Bartholomew with a sharpened knife, tells its own grim tale. Every living creature inside Blackwood represents a dwindling, precious source of protein. You even notice some of the younger, hungrier guards eyeing the castle rats with a disturbing intensity. Guess Fido's not so loyal when he's dinner, you think, a grim joke to yourself. The enemy outside, meanwhile, seems well fed, their campfires bright and numerous. You can sometimes catch the distant scent of their cooking fires, a tantalizing waft of roasting meat that sends pangs of agony through your empty stomach. It's a deliberate psychological tactic, of course, to parade their abundance before the starving defenders. Each whiff of their hearty meals is a subtle jab, a reminder of what you lack and what they have in seemingly endless supply. The enemy knows that a full belly breeds confidence, and an empty one, despair. The very landscape around Blackwood has changed. The verdant forests are now scarred with the paths of foraging parties. Desperate attempts to find wild game or edible plants outside the castle walls. Many of these attempts fail, thwarted by enemy patrols, or simply yielding nothing. Those who return often carry tales of near misses, of freezing nights, and of the crushing disappointment of empty hands. The forest, once a source of abundance, is now a dangerous, barren place, choked off by the besiegers. You start to notice the physical changes in yourself and those around you. Your clothes hang looser, your steps feel heavier. The once robust castle soldiers, famed for their strength, now move with a slow, deliberate caution, conserving every ounce of energy. Their faces are drawn, their eyes sunken, reflecting the internal struggle against constant hunger. The children, usually boisterous and full of life, are quieter, their play subdued, their cries more frequent. Their thin limbs and distended bellies are a haunting sight, a constant indictment of your predicament. The water supply, while not entirely cut off thanks to the castle's deep well, has become a concern. The taste of the well water has grown stale, metallic, and sometimes carries a faint, unpleasant odor. You try not to dwell on it, but the worry of contaminated water adds another layer of anxiety to your already strained existence. You recall old tales of sieges where disease, spread by poor sanitation and contaminated water, decimated defenders faster than any enemy blade. Just what we need, you mutter, to fight both hunger and the runs. The nights are the worst. Sleep offers little respite, often interrupted by vivid dreams of banquets and overflowing platters. You wake with a start, your stomach cramping, the phantom smells of roasted chicken and warm bread lingering in your nostrils before dissolving into the cold, empty reality of your besieged state. You envy the dead. At least their hunger is gone. This kind of mental torture, the constant craving, the vivid hallucinations of food, are almost worse than the physical pain. It's a relentless, psychological assault. You notice Lord Edmund, too, beginning to show the strain. His shoulders are stooped, his jawline sharper, his eyes holding a haunted, weary look. He spends hours in the watchtower, staring out at the enemy camp as if willing them to disappear. He knows the weight of responsibility, the thousands of lives that depend on his decisions. He carries the burden of every hungry mouth, every empty stomach, every whispered fear within the castle walls. His burden is heavier than any armor. The common people, the villagers who sought refuge within the castle, are the most vulnerable. They lack the training and the physical resilience of the soldiers. Their children are the first to show the signs of severe malnutrition, their tiny bodies wasting away. You see mothers trying to quiet their wailing infants, offering them nothing but the empty promise of tomorrow's gruel. It's a heartbreaking sight, a grim testament to the silent, invisible enemy that is slowly strangling Blackwood from within. Scholars still debate the efficacy of certain medieval siege diets and the specific nutrient deficiencies that would have arisen. While anecdotal evidence suggests the consumption of unusual items, the long-term effects of a diet lacking in essential vitamins and minerals would have led to widespread scurvy, rickets, and other debilitating diseases, further weakening the defenders. The psychological impact of starvation, including lethargy, irritability, and despair, would also have compromised their ability to fight or even make rational decisions. It's a subtle but critical point. Hunger doesn't just make you weak, it breaks your mind. You walk the ramparts, your breath misting in the cold air, your eyes scanning the horizon. The enemy banners still fly defiantly. There is no sign of a relief force, no distant friendly banners appearing over the hills, just the same grim, unyielding blockade. The initial shock of the siege has worn off, replaced by a dull, aching reality. The hunger is now a constant companion, a heavy cloak draped over every thought, every action. You know, deep in your gut, that the true struggle has only just begun. The struggle for food, for survival, and for the very essence of your humanity. The initial nagging hunger you felt on the parapets of Castle Blackwood has now deepened into a relentless, gnawing ache that occupies your every waking thought. Weeks have turned into months, and the imposing stone walls that once offered security now feel like the unyielding confines of a cage. The enemy outside shows no sign of relenting, their siege lines a constant, dark smudge on the horizon. The very air within the castle feels heavier, laden with unspoken anxieties and the pervasive scent of dwindling hope. You recall the early days, when the larders were still impressive, brimming with salted pork and dried fish. Now, those memories are like faded photographs, cruel reminders of a past abundance. The daily rations, once meager, have become painfully insufficient. The thin gruel, once primarily oat-based, is now stretched with whatever can be found: a handful of dusty legumes, a few dried berries foraged from within the castle grounds before the siege began. The flavor, what little there is, has become monotonous, a constant reminder of deprivation. You walk through the castle kitchens, once a bustling, aromatic hub of activity, now eerily quiet. The massive hearth, usually roaring with flames, is reduced to a few smoldering embers. Cook Agnes, once a plump and cheerful woman, now moves with a slow, deliberate weariness, her frame visibly thinner. You see her meticulously scraping the bottoms of barrels, trying to extract every last grain of flour, every trace of grease. The few remaining sacks of grain are guarded with fierce intensity, their contents diminishing day by day. It's like watching a sand timer run out, but the grains are your very survival. The castle's livestock, once a source of comfort and sustenance, are nearly gone. The last scrawny chicken was slaughtered days ago, its meager meat boiled into a broth so thin it was almost transparent. Lord Edmund's prized hunting dogs, once loyal companions, were consumed weeks prior, a decision that weighed heavily on the Lord but was a stark necessity. The only animals left now are the ones that thrive in the shadows: rats and mice. You find yourself eyeing them with a new, unsettling interest, a desperate thought flickering in the back of your mind. Well, if it squeaks, it's meat, right? You think, a dark chuckle escaping your parched lips. A common historical fact about medieval sieges is that cannibalism, though rare and considered taboo, did occur in extreme circumstances. Accounts from various sieges, such as the siege of Maara during the First Crusade or the siege of Paris in 1590, document instances where defenders, pushed to the brink of starvation, resorted to consuming human flesh. However, a lesser-known detail is that such acts were almost always a last resort, undertaken in profound desperation and often shrouded in secrecy due to the immense social and religious stigma attached to them. Historians still debate the extent and frequency of these events, as many accounts might be exaggerated by victorious besiegers to demonize their enemies. The shift in diet has had profound physical consequences. Your muscles ache constantly, a deep, persistent soreness that never fully dissipates. Your vision, once sharp, sometimes blurs at the edges, and dizzy spells are becoming more frequent, especially when you stand up too quickly. Your skin is dry and flaky, your hair brittle. Your immune system feels compromised. A simple cold that swept through the barracks lingers, making you cough and wheeze with alarming regularity. Every movement is a conscious effort, a careful expenditure of precious, dwindling energy. You've started to notice the strange things people are doing for food. A younger guard, caught trying to eat the leather from his belt, was severely reprimanded, but you understood his desperation. Another was seen boiling old boots, hoping to soften the leather enough to extract some meager nutrients. The desperation is a tangible thing, a cloud that hangs over every conversation, every interaction. People's faces are sunken, their eyes wide and bloodshot, reflecting a primal, unyielding hunger. Lord Edmund, too, is a shadow of his former self. His stern demeanor has given way to a haunted weariness. He paces the battlements endlessly, his gaze fixed on the enemy lines, no doubt agonizing over the impossible choices before him. He has ordered a detailed inventory of every single edible item in the castle, down to the last scrap of dried vegetable and the smallest packet of spices. Every decision about rationing is agonizing, a grim calculus of who gets to survive a little longer. You hear murmurs that even his personal stores, usually vast, are now depleted to almost nothing. The castle, well, thankfully, still provides water, but its quality has worsened. It tastes brackish, sometimes muddy, and rumors of illness spread whenever someone falls sick with stomach cramps. Despite the taste, you drink it, desperate for hydration, knowing that contaminated water is still better than no water at all. The fear of disease, the silent killer, adds another layer of dread to your already perilous existence. You find yourself wondering if it's better to succumb to hunger or to a quick, violent illness. You remember the horses, Lord Edmund's war horses, once magnificent beasts, were a painful necessity. Their meat, though tough and unfamiliar, provided a surge of calories that briefly lifted morale, a fleeting illusion of a full belly, but even that was a temporary measure. The last horse was butchered weeks ago, and now the silence of the stables is another chilling reminder of your dwindling resources. You hear some of the older, wiser soldiers reminiscing about horse meat being a traditional food source for ancient nomadic tribes, a grim attempt to normalize the unthinkable. Well, at least it's not Fido, you mutter, remembering the dogs. The castle's defenses, while still formidable, are beginning to show the strain of the defenders' weakness. Soldiers on watch duty sometimes nod off, their strength failing them. Their movements are slower, their reactions dulled. The besieging army seems to sense this, their probes and skirmishes growing bolder. They are testing your resolve, waiting for hunger to do their work for them. It's a terrifying dance, a silent battle of wills and endurance. You find yourself scavenging like a ravenous animal. You examine patches of moss on the castle walls, wondering if they are edible. You pick through dried leaves that have blown into the courtyards, hoping to find something, anything, that might offer sustenance. You even try to scrape lichen from the stones, only to find it bitter and unpalatable. This primal instinct to find food, to survive, has taken over your very being, reducing your complex human thoughts to a singular, desperate drive. Scholars still debate the specific botanical knowledge of besieged medieval populations. While some basic knowledge of local edible plants likely existed, the stress of a siege, combined with limited foraging opportunities, would have made systematic and safe plant gathering difficult. Furthermore, many edible plants require preparation to remove toxins or improve digestibility, knowledge that might not have been widely held or easily practiced under duress. This makes the effectiveness of foraging as a long-term strategy highly questionable. The children within the castle are suffering the most. Their small, fragile bodies are simply not equipped to withstand such prolonged deprivation. You see their gaunt faces, their dull eyes, their listless movements. Their cries of hunger are no longer sharp and demanding, but weak and mournful. Mothers, desperate, try to soothe them with promises of food that cannot be delivered. It's a heartbreaking tableau, a constant reminder of the innocent lives caught in this grim struggle. Their plight haunts your dreams, if you can even call them that. You recall a disturbing conversation you overheard between two older sergeants, whispering in a dark corner of the barracks. They spoke of the tallow candles, the rudimentary lighting sources in the castle, made from rendered animal fat. They discussed boiling the tallow, trying to extract any remaining nutrients, a last desperate attempt at calories. The thought of consuming candle wax sends a shudder down your spine, but then you consider your own empty stomach, and the shudder transforms into a grim understanding. You realize that the line between edible and inedible is becoming increasingly blurred, almost non-existent. The rats, they are everywhere now, emboldened by the castle's dwindling activity and the desperation of its inhabitants. You hear them scurrying in the walls, scuttling across the floors, their eyes gleaming in the dim torchlight. Some guards have set crude traps, or even tried to hunt them with sharpened sticks. The sight of a dead rat, once a cause for disgust, is now met with a strange, calculating hunger. The smell of cooking rat meat, though faintly metallic and unpleasant, has become a familiar, if unsettling, aroma in some of the more desperate corners of the castle. Well, at least they're fresh, you grimly quip to yourself, trying to lighten the dark mood, but the joke falls flat, even to your own ears. You remember stories from other sieges, tales passed down by old soldiers in taverns, stories of grinding bones into flour, of boiling leather, of eating sawdust. At the time, they seemed like morbid fables, exaggerated for dramatic effect. Now, you realize they were not fables at all. They were blueprints for survival, desperate measures taken when every conventional food source had been exhausted. The line between human and animal, between civilization and raw instinct, blurs with each passing day of hunger. As you gaze out from the ramparts, the enemy fires still burn brightly. There is no sign of an end to this ordeal, no relief force on the horizon, just the endless, crushing blockade. The cold seeps into your bones, and the hunger gnaws at your gut. You know that the food stores are now truly, critically low. The next few weeks will bring choices that you never imagined, choices that will test the very limits of human endurance and dignity. The disturbing diet of a besieged castle is about to get a whole lot more disturbing. The persistent ache in your stomach has sharpened into a relentless, burning agony. You've passed the stage of mere hunger. This is starvation, a deep, primal emptiness that consumes your thoughts, distorts your senses, and saps your very will. Days blend into a monotonous cycle of cold watches, restless attempts at sleep, and the constant, overwhelming craving for sustenance. Castle Blackwood, once a symbol of strength and refuge, now feels like a tomb slowly sealing itself with your dwindling resolve. The last of the castle's meager grain stores, those carefully guarded sacks of wheat and oats, have long since been consumed. Cook Agnes now presides over truly empty bins, her face a mask of gaunt despair. The thin gruel you once received is a distant memory, replaced by nothing but the occasional mouthful of muddy well water, which itself feels increasingly insufficient. The silence in the kitchen, once merely quiet, is now unnerving, a stark contrast to the distant, persistent sounds of the besieging army, who seem to be feasting with impunity. You find yourself constantly licking your dry, cracked lips, the sensation offering no relief. Your tongue feels thick, your throat raw. Dehydration adds another layer of suffering to the relentless hunger. You fantasize about food, not just a meal, but specific dishes: a plump roasted pheasant, its skin crackling with fat, a hearty loaf of warm, yeasty bread, a bubbling pot of rich, meaty stew. These vivid mental images are a torment, a cruel trick of your starving mind. Just one bite, you whisper to yourself, just one bite. The castle's dwindling animal population is now a zero-sum game. The horses are long gone, their meat providing a brief, fleeting burst of energy weeks ago. The last remaining dogs, cats, even the guard mice you vaguely remember scurrying in the barracks, have all been hunted down and consumed. The absence of their familiar sounds, the whimper, the purr, the tiny scamper, is another grim indicator of your desperate situation. The very air seems devoid of any organic scent, save for the faint, metallic tang of desperation and the lingering stench of unwashed bodies. A common historical fact about medieval sieges is that the defenders often became weaker and more susceptible to disease than the besiegers. Malnutrition, cramped conditions, poor sanitation, and the psychological stress of the siege created a perfect breeding ground for illness. However, a lesser-known detail is that certain nutrient deficiencies, particularly scurvy, caused by a lack of vitamin C, could incapacitate an entire garrison even if they had some caloric intake, leading to bleeding gums, joint pain, and extreme fatigue, severely compromising their ability to fight or even stand guard. Historians often debate the specific diseases that ravaged besieged populations, given the often vague descriptions in historical accounts. You watch the other guards on the ramparts. Their movements are slow, almost shuffling. Their eyes, once sharp and alert, are now dull and unfocused, constantly darting about, searching for anything remotely edible. You see them covertly scraping lichen from the cold stone walls, chewing on bits of dried leather from their equipment, even attempting to boil scraps of old, hardened bread from forgotten corners. These are not acts of defiance or bravery, but of primal, desperate instinct. The dignity of a soldier, of a human being, slowly erodes under the relentless assault of hunger. Lord Edmund, too, is barely recognizable. His once imposing figure is now gaunt and stooped, his face etched with profound weariness and the agony of responsibility. He no longer shouts commands, but speaks in a hoarse whisper, his voice rough from lack of hydration and the constant gnawing of worry. You sometimes see him staring out at the enemy camp, not with defiance, but with a profound, aching despair. He carries the weight of every starving child, every weak soldier, every whispered prayer for relief that never comes. His silence is more terrifying than any outburst. The children within the castle walls are fading. Their gaunt faces and distended bellies are a constant, heartbreaking sight. Their cries have diminished from wails to weak whimpers, then to a terrifying silence. Mothers clutch their emaciated infants, their eyes haunted, knowing there is nothing left to give. The castle is becoming a place of slow, agonizing death, a nursery for starvation. You try to avoid looking at them, but their suffering is a raw, inescapable reality, a wound on your soul that will never fully heal. The thought of meat, any meat, has become an obsession. You find yourself idly wondering about the castle horses again. Even though you know they are long gone, you recall the taste, tough and gamey, but undeniably filling for a brief time. The thought lingers, twisting your empty stomach. You begin to contemplate other sources that would once have been unthinkable, repulsive. The line between what is food and what is not food has become blurred, then erased, then redrawn by the desperate hand of survival. You remember the castle's stable straw, once only fit for bedding for animals. Now it is collected with grim determination. You see it being boiled, then filtered, the hope being to extract any residual nutrients from the dried grass and chaff. The resulting liquid is thin, tasteless, and provides almost no caloric value, but it offers a fleeting illusion of consumption, a psychological comfort that something is entering your body. It's a testament to how far desperation can push human ingenuity, even when faced with insurmountable biological limits. Scholars often debate the caloric needs of medieval soldiers and civilians during a siege. While a fighting man might need 3,000 to 4,000 calories per day, civilians, especially children and the elderly, would require less, but still significant amounts. When supplies dropped to below 500 to 1,000 calories per day, severe malnutrition, muscle wasting, and organ failure would rapidly set in. The body would begin to consume its own muscle tissue for energy, leading to extreme weakness and susceptibility to disease. This explains the rapid deterioration of health you witness around you as the human body, in essence, begins to eat itself. The enemy outside, meanwhile, seems to be thriving. You can still see their campfires burning brightly, and the occasional gust of wind carries the faint, tantalizing aroma of roasting meat. It's a deliberate psychological torture, a reminder of their abundance and your deprivation. Their patrols are bolder, their siege engines more active. They know you are weakening, and they are pressing their advantage, waiting for the castle to collapse from within, not from without. It's a cruel game of patience, and you are losing. You try to focus on your duty, to scan the distant lines, but your mind is a chaotic mess of hunger and fear. Your body feels heavy, your limbs leaden. Your sword, once a familiar extension of your arm, now feels like an unbearable weight. You sway on the parapet, catching yourself just in time. A wave of dizziness washing over you. The cold wind bites at your exposed skin, and you shiver uncontrollably, your body's internal furnace burning low. You notice the desperation in the eyes of your fellow guards. They are hollow, haunted eyes, reflecting the same torment you feel. There's a silent understanding between you, a shared burden of suffering. You offer a weak nod to the guard beside you, a man named Gareth, who simply grunts in response, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, as if searching for something, anything, to break this endless siege. His face is gaunt, his beard straggly, his once booming voice reduced to a raspy whisper. The communal spirit that held the castle together in the early days has fractured. People retreat into themselves, conserving energy, wary of others. There is no longer the shared camaraderie of hardship, but a more primal, individual struggle for survival. Arguments break out over the smallest things, a perceived larger share of water, a dried crumb found on the floor. Humanity, stripped bare by hunger, reveals its rawest instincts. It's a disturbing transformation to witness. You recall a particular detail that truly disturbed you seeing a group of villagers, desperate with hunger, boiling leather straps from old saddles and even boots. The smell was acrid, sickening, and the resulting gelatinous liquid offered little sustenance. They would gnaw on the softened leather, hoping to extract any protein, any calorie, from the indigestible material. It was a grim spectacle, a stark illustration of how far the human body would go to avoid shutting down completely. Guess those old boots finally found their purpose, you think, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping you. Scholars still debate the specific methods medieval people used to render unpalatable materials edible during sieges. While boiling leather might soften it and release some collagen, the nutritional value would have been minimal, and the indigestible fibers would have caused severe digestive issues. This kind of food was more about psychological comfort and a desperate attempt to fill the stomach than providing actual nourishment, contributing further to starvation rather than alleviating it. The very stone of the castle feels cold and indifferent to your suffering. The high walls, once a source of pride, now feel like a monumental tomb. The enemy continues its slow, relentless pressure, tightening the noose around Blackwood. You know, with a chilling certainty, that the point of no return is rapidly approaching. The choice will soon be between an unthinkable surrender or an even more unthinkable descent into the darkest corners of human survival. And you know, deep in your gut, that the true horrors of the besieged diet are only just beginning to reveal themselves. The gnawing emptiness in your gut has deepened into a constant searing pain, a phantom limb of hunger that never quite disappears. You've moved beyond the point of mere appetite. This is a primal, biological demand that overrides all other thoughts. Your body, once a robust vessel, is now a collection of aching bones and weary muscles, constantly demanding sustenance that simply isn't there. Castle Blackwood, once your sanctuary, feels less like a fortress and more like a tomb, slowly suffocating its inhabitants. The last pitiful scraps of grain are long gone. The meager rations of watery gruel are a distant, almost luxurious memory. Cook Agnes, now gaunt and hollow-eyed, spends her days staring blankly at empty cauldrons, her once skilled hands hanging uselessly by her sides. The very air in the castle is thin. carrying the faint, lingering scent of despair and the metallic tang of starvation. You feel your own breath coming in ragged gasps, each one a conscious effort. You try to recall the taste of something sweet, something rich, but the memory is fading, replaced by the bitter, metallic taste of your own saliva. Your dreams are a cruel torment, filled with impossible feasts and overflowing platters, only to wake to the crushing reality of your empty stomach. Sleep offers no escape, just a brief, restless interlude before the hunger resumes its relentless assault. If I could just have one apple, you think. Just one juicy, crisp apple. The castle's animals, once a source of food, are utterly eradicated. The horses, the chickens, the pigs, even the few scrawny cats that once stalked the shadows, all have been consumed, their brief contribution to your survival long exhausted. The silence of the stables, the absence of animal sounds from the courtyards, is a chilling testament to your desperate situation. Now, the only creatures thriving in this desolate environment are those that have always existed on the fringes of human habitation, the very definition of unwanted guests. You find yourself drawn to the dark, damp corners of the barracks, the forgotten spaces in the cellars, anywhere that might harbor movement. Your eyes, once trained to spot distant enemy formations, now scan for something far smaller, something far more unsettling. You're looking for insects and rodents, a spider scuttling across a wall, a beetle scurrying over a loose stone, a rat darting into the shadows. These sights, once met with disgust, now spark a perverse, desperate interest. A common historical fact about sieges is that rats and mice were often consumed by starving garrisons. These rodents, typically considered vermin, became a last resort source of protein when all other food supplies were exhausted. However, a lesser-known detail is that while providing calories, these animals also carry diseases, potentially introducing new pathogens into an already weakened and unsanitary environment, accelerating the spread of illness within the besieged population. Historians still debate the extent to which disease, rather than direct starvation, was the primary cause of death in some prolonged sieges. You remember the first time you saw a fellow guard, a burly man named Gareth, openly hunt a rat. He cornered it in a forgotten pantry, his movements slow but deliberate, driven by a raw, primal hunger. The kill was swift, brutal. Then, with a chilling lack of ceremony, he cleaned it, singed its fur over a meager flame, and devoured it, raw and steaming. The sight turned your stomach, but the desperate, almost animalistic satisfaction on his face was undeniable. You felt a morbid curiosity, a disturbing understanding of his actions. Well, that's one way to get your protein, you thought, a dark, unsettling humor flickering in your mind. The consumption of insects is even more disturbing. You see men picking through cracks in the stone, searching for woodlice. Others meticulously turn over fallen leaves in the castle garden, hoping to find grubs or worms. The small, chitinous bodies are often eaten raw, providing a fleeting burst of protein, a desperate attempt to stave off the inevitable. The taste is bland, earthy, sometimes bitter, but your starving body doesn't care. It simply craves calories, any calories from any source. You find yourself wondering almost detachedly if you could do it too. Lord Edmund, too, has visibly deteriorated. His command is now delivered in a raspy whisper, his once sharp eyes clouded with fatigue and despair. He oversees the final, desperate measures, but his movements are slow, his decisions labored. He knows the grim reality the castle is starving. He walks the battlements, not looking for relief, but for a sign from the enemy, an offer of surrender that might spare his people from the ultimate indignity. His silent suffering is a heavy weight on the morale of the entire garrison. The children are dying. Their silent, emaciated forms are a constant, heartbreaking presence. Mothers, themselves little more than skin and bone, cradle their unresponsive infants, their faces etched with a grief so profound it transcends all hunger. The castle's infirmary, once a place of healing, is now a charnel house, filled with the dying and the dead, their bodies ravaged by starvation and opportunistic diseases. You pass through it quickly, trying to avoid the sight, but the images haunt your waking hours and infest your nightmares. You recall a specific instance that marked a turning point in your own willingness to consider the unthinkable. You were on watch one freezing night, your teeth chattering, your stomach cramping violently. A small, brown mouse scurried across the parapet, seeking shelter from the biting wind. Your eyes, usually focused on the distant enemy, locked onto it. It wasn't just a mouse, it was a potential meal, a tiny, fleeting source of energy. Without thinking, your hand shot out, surprisingly quick despite your weakness, and you caught it. The small, warm body trembled in your grip. You hesitated for a long, agonizing moment. Then, driven by an instinct more powerful than any societal taboo, you bit. The taste was gamey, musky, but undeniably meat. The brief surge of energy was intoxicating, a momentary reprieve from the gnawing emptiness. You realize, with a chilling clarity, that you have crossed a line you once swore you never would. Well, that's a new personal low, you think, a grim, self-deprecating humor. Scholars still debate the psychological impact of consuming non-traditional food sources during prolonged sieges. While the immediate physical need for calories might override disgust, the long-term mental toll of eating vermin or insects, often raw, could contribute to profound psychological trauma, feelings of dehumanization, and even cannibalistic ideation. The violation of cultural and dietary norms would have had a deep, lasting impact on the survivors. The enemy outside, meanwhile, seems to be growing bolder, their campfires now almost reaching the outer limits of the castle's range. You can hear their raucous laughter, their songs, and the ever-present tantalizing smell of their cooking fires, a cruel and constant reminder of their abundance. They know you are breaking, slowly, inexorably. They are simply waiting for the final collapse, for hunger to do their work for them. It's a game of patience, and their patience seems infinite, while yours is running out. You find yourself scavenging with a desperate intensity, a primal urge that overrides all sense of dignity. You crawl into narrow crevices, poke into forgotten corners, searching for anything that moves, anything that breathes. You learn to distinguish the scurrying of a rat from the rustle of leaves, the hum of a fly from the buzz of a beetle. Your senses, dulled by starvation, sharpen in this one singular pursuit, finding food, no matter how disturbing its source. The castle walls, once your protection, now feel like the confines of a prison, and the besieging army, your jailers. The sounds of the outside world, the chirping of crickets, the distant call of a bird, are a cruel reminder of the life beyond your stone prison, a life where food is abundant and easily found. You envy those tiny free creatures, their ability to find sustenance without the desperate, dehumanizing struggle that has become your daily existence. You remember the old tales of sieges where defenders ate the straw from their mattresses or the leather bindings of books. These once seemed like exaggerated horrors. Now, you understand them as desperate acts of survival. The human body, when pushed to its absolute limits, will seek calories from any source, however unpalatable, however repugnant. The mind, too, will adapt, normalizing the unthinkable in the relentless pursuit of self-preservation. As you stand watch, the cold wind whipping at your tattered clothes, your stomach a hollow cavity of pain, you know that the castle's resources are now truly exhausted. The last desperate sources of protein, the insects and rodents, are themselves becoming scarce, hunted to near extinction within the confines of Blackwood. The next stages of the siege diet will delve into even darker, more unimaginable territory. The line you crossed with the mouse was just the beginning. The gnawing, acidic pain in your stomach has become a constant companion, a physical manifestation of the despair that now permeates every stone of Castle Blackwood. You are beyond hunger. This is a state of advanced starvation, where your body, desperate for energy, begins to consume itself. Your movements are slow, deliberate, each step a conscious battle against the crushing fatigue that threatens to pull you down. The air within the castle, thin and stale, seems to hum with the collective agony of its starving inhabitants. The last of the insects and rodents, once a horrifying but viable food source, have been hunted to near extinction within the castle walls. The fleeting energy they provided is long gone, replaced by a profound weakness that makes even standing guard a Herculean effort. Cook Agnes no longer even pretends to prepare food. She simply sits by the cold hearth, a gaunt, silent sentinel of starvation. The silence in the kitchen is absolute, a tomb-like quietude broken only by the occasional cough or the faint groan of a suffering soul. You dream of food, not just a meal, but the texture, the warmth, the sheer substance of it. A thick slice of roast beef, dripping with juices, a crusty loaf of fresh bread, torn apart with your teeth, a bowl of steaming, buttery porridge. These dreams are more vivid, more tantalizing, and more painful than any nightmare. You wake with a start, your mouth watering, only to be confronted by the brutal reality of your empty belly and the chilling cold of the barracks. Just one tiny morsel. You beg yourself, anything. The castle's defenses, once formidable, are crumbling from within. The soldiers, once proud and strong, are now gaunt shadows, their eyes hollow, their movements sluggish. Their spears feel like lead weights, their shields too heavy to lift. The enemy outside, sensing this profound weakness, presses closer, their taunts growing louder, their confidence palpable. You hear them shouting promises of hot food and warm beds if only you would surrender. The temptation, a dark, insidious whisper, grows stronger with each passing day. A common historical fact about prolonged sieges is that the defenders' morale often broke long before their physical capacity to fight was completely gone. The psychological toll of starvation, isolation, and constant threat led to widespread despair, mutiny, or surrender even when some meager defenses remained. However, a lesser-known detail is that the perceived injustice of their situation, being abandoned by allies or facing overwhelming odds, often amplified this despair, making defenders question the very purpose of their continued suffering. Historians still debate the precise interplay between physical and psychological factors in determining the outcome of a medieval siege. You find yourself staring at the unyielding stone walls of the castle, a strange, desperate thought forming in your mind. Stone, of course, isn't edible. But what about the mortar between the stones, or the earth beneath the floorboards? You're searching for anything that might provide a calorie, a nutrient, a fleeting illusion of sustenance. Your mind, warped by hunger, begins to consider the truly unthinkable, pushing the boundaries of what constitutes food. You recall seeing some of the more desperate villagers, their faces a mask of grim determination, collecting bones, not just fresh bones from recently consumed animals, but old, brittle bones, gnawed clean weeks or months ago. They gather them from rubbish piles, from the castle kennels, from anywhere they can be found. The sound of these bones being hammered, crushed, or ground is now a familiar, horrifying soundtrack to your days. This is the grim reality. People are trying to make bone meal. The process is arduous and disgusting. The bones are first boiled, sometimes for hours, in the hope of extracting any remaining marrow or gelatin. The resulting broth is thin, greasy, and foul-smelling, but it offers a tiny amount of fat and protein. Then, the boiled bones are dried and painstakingly crushed into a coarse powder. This powder, gritty and unpleasant, is then mixed with a small amount of water or whatever meager liquid can be found, creating a paste or a thin gruel. The texture is chalky, the taste often acrid, but it's a desperate attempt to gain any calories. Looks like bone broth's getting a medieval makeover, you grimly joke to yourself, the humor tasting like ash in your mouth. Lord Edmund looks upon this scene with a profound weariness. He has given no official order for such a practice, but he does not forbid it either. He knows the depths of their desperation, and he understands that such extreme measures are born of a primal instinct for survival. He walks among his people, his gaze filled with a silent, agonizing pity, seeing the degradation forced upon them by the siege. His silence speaks volumes, a heavy acknowledgement of the unbearable choices being made. The children, those few who still cling to life, are suffering unimaginable agonies. Their small bodies are skeletal, their eyes sunken and dull. They lie listlessly in their mother's arms, too weak to cry, too weak to move. The consumption of bone meal, indigestible for their fragile systems, often leads to severe digestive issues, further weakening them. You avert your gaze, unable to bear the sight, but the quiet, desperate cries of their mothers are a constant echo in your mind. Scholars still debate the actual nutritional value of consuming bone meal during severe famine. While bones do contain calcium and some minerals, and boiling can extract a small amount of fat and protein from marrow or connective tissue, the bulk of bone is indigestible. Consuming significant amounts could lead to severe constipation, digestive blockages, and the rapid depletion of what few digestive enzymes a starving body might still produce, ultimately worsening the effects of malnutrition. It was a desperate act of false hope, fueled by the body's raw need. The enemy outside continues its relentless pressure. Their campfires blaze brighter at night, and the tantalizing scent of roasting meat still drifts on the wind, a cruel olfactory torture. They send heralds to the castle gates, shouting terms of surrender, promising food and mercy. The temptation is immense, a siren song of warmth and sustenance. You see some of the younger guards looking longingly towards the enemy lines, their resolve weakening with each passing hour of hunger. You, too, feel the insidious pull of surrender, the thought of a full belly, a warm bed, a moment without the agonizing pain of hunger is almost overwhelming. But then you remember Lord Edmund's solemn face, the trust in his eyes, the oaths you swore. You remember the enemy's reputation for brutality, their broken promises in past campaigns. You shake your head, trying to clear the fog of starvation from your mind, trying to cling to the last vestiges of your honor. You find yourself gnawing on a piece of dried, boiled leather, a strip from an old harness. It's tough, rubbery, and utterly devoid of flavor, but the act of chewing, the mechanical motion, offers a psychological comfort. It creates the illusion of consumption, a fleeting sense that something, anything, is entering your stomach. Your teeth ache, your jaws are sore, but you continue, driven by a primal need to silence the incessant clamor of your hunger. The castle walls, once symbols of impregnability, now feel like the thin skin of a drum, echoing with the sounds of misery. The cold seeps into your very bones, a chill that no amount of clothing can dispel. Your body shivers uncontrollably, a constant tremor born of exhaustion and profound nutrient deficiency. You lean against the cold stone, wishing for oblivion, for an end to this torment. You remember stories from ancient sieges, tales of defenders resorting to truly unspeakable acts to survive, boiling shoes, eating tree bark, consuming their own waste in a desperate attempt to extract any remaining nutrients. At the time, They seem like grotesque fables, warnings from a distant past. Now, you understand. You are living those fables. You are seeing the very fabric of humanity unravel under the relentless assault of starvation. The line between human and animal, between civilization and savagery, has blurred, and for some, it has vanished entirely. Scholars often note that the desperation of besieged populations led to remarkably inventive, albeit often futile, culinary practices. From boiling leather to grinding bone, these methods were born of extreme necessity. The psychological toll of preparing and consuming such food would have been immense, a constant reminder of their dire circumstances and the dehumanizing effects of prolonged deprivation. As the sun sets over Castle Blackwood, casting long, stark shadows across the starving grounds, you know that the castle is at its breaking point. The reserves are not merely low, they are non-existent. The desperate measures, the bone meal, the leather, the increasingly scarce vermin, are no longer enough. The next stage of the besieged diet will be the darkest yet, a descent into the realm of the truly unspeakable, a choice that will test the very core of your being. You can almost feel the presence of the ultimate taboo, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be embraced. The gnawing emptiness in your gut has morphed into a dull, constant ache, a deeper, more insidious pain that permeates every fiber of your being. Your body feels like a hollow vessel, fueled by nothing but the desperate, flickering embers of will. You are no longer just hungry. You are being consumed from within. Castle Blackwood, once a bastion of strength, now feels like a slowly eroding island, its inhabitants weakening with each relentless wave of starvation. The last pitiful efforts to extract sustenance from bones, leather, and the few remaining insects have ceased. Cook Agnes no longer even sits by the hearth. She lies in a corner, motionless, her breathing shallow and ragged. The silence in the kitchen is absolute, broken only by the distant mocking sounds of the besieging army's campfires, their laughter and songs carrying on the biting wind. You are acutely aware that while you starve, they feast. A cruel psychological torment. You crave green things, anything fresh and vibrant to cut through the monotony of dust and despair. Your dreams, when they come, are no longer of roasted meats, but of lush fields, dewy grass, and crisp, sweet berries. You wake with a dry mouth, your throat raw from thirst, the phantom taste of chlorophyll clinging to your tongue before dissolving into the bitter reality of your parched throat. Just a single green leaf, you whisper. That's all I ask. The castle's courtyard, once a place of activity, is now quiet, its usually well-tended garden choked with weeds. The few small patches of grass are trampled and barren. But your eyes, sharpened by desperation, now scan for something else. You look for anything that grows, anything that might be overlooked, any sign of life that could offer a fleeting hope of sustenance. Your gaze falls upon patches of moss, lichen, and the sparse, withered weeds clinging to the cracks in the stone walls and pavements. A common historical fact about sieges is that foraging for wild plants was a common, though dangerous, tactic for survival. Defenders would often sneak out under the cover of darkness, risking capture or death, to gather whatever edible plants they could find from the surrounding countryside. However, a lesser-known detail is the extreme risk of poisoning. Without proper botanical knowledge, desperate foragers often consumed toxic plants, mistaking them for edible varieties, leading to severe illness or death, inadvertently helping the besiegers. Historians still debate how much genuine botanical knowledge medieval commoners possessed versus how much was lost during times of widespread hardship. You remember seeing some of the more desperate villagers, their eyes wild with hunger, pulling up handfuls of grass and weeds from the few remaining untrodden areas of the courtyard. They would chew on them, unwashed, bitter, and fibrous, trying to extract any moisture or nutrient. The sight was unsettling, a clear sign of the complete breakdown of normal human dietary habits. It was like watching animals graze, but animals driven to the brink. Well, at least it's green, you muttered, a grim attempt at finding a silver lining. You find yourself doing the same. You kneel, your weakened body protesting, and scrape a small patch of moss from a damp stone. It's spongy, tasteless, and provides virtually no caloric value, but the act of putting something green in your mouth, feeling its slight moisture, offers a fleeting, psychological comfort. You chew it slowly, methodically, trying to convince your body that it's receiving nourishment, even as your stomach cramps in protest. Lord Edmund, now a mere skeleton draped in his noble robes, watches these desperate acts with profound sorrow. He has ordered his remaining men to carefully, cautiously, search the castle grounds for any patch of edible greenery. He knows the danger of poisonous plants, but the alternative, total starvation, is far worse. He supervises the collection, his eyes hollow, his jaw clenched, the heavy weight of his people's suffering pressing down on him. His authority is now defined by his ability to find even the most meager, disgusting sources of food. The castle's outer bailey, once a bustling space for training and general activity, is now picked clean. Every blade of grass, every weed, every accessible root has been consumed. You see soldiers meticulously digging at the base of trees, trying to uncover roots and tubers, anything that might hold a bit of starch or moisture. The soil is hard, frozen in patches, and their efforts yield little but bruised fingers and aching backs. The return of a foraging party with a handful of bitter roots is now met with the same desperate excitement that a feast would have once commanded. You recall a disturbing conversation about boiling tree bark. Some of the older men, remembering tales from past famines, spoke of scraping the inner bark of certain trees, particularly elm or pine, then boiling it for hours to create a chewy, fibrous, and largely indigestible mass. The taste was astringent, bitter, and offered negligible nutritional value, but it was something. The very thought of it makes your stomach churn, but then you realize that you are not far from that desperate stage yourself. Guess the tree's getting a haircut, you quip, though the words feel hollow in your mouth. Scholars still extensively debate the actual edibility and nutritional value of various wild plants consumed during sieges. While some roots and leaves are indeed edible, many require specific preparation to remove toxins, and their caloric content is often very low, making them unsustainable as a primary food source for a large population. Furthermore, widespread foraging within confined castle grounds would quickly deplete any available resources, turning a desperate act into a futile one within days. The children within the castle are now skeletal, their large, vacant eyes reflecting a profound, unnatural stillness. Their whimpers are rare now, replaced by shallow, labored breathing. The lack of proper nutrition, especially for their developing bodies, has led to widespread diseases, their tiny immune systems simply unable to fight. You see mothers holding them, rocking them gently, knowing that their fragile lives are slowly, inevitably slipping away. The silence of the dying children is the most profound horror, a haunting reminder of what starvation truly means. The enemy outside, meanwhile, seems to be celebrating. You hear their distant trumpets, their drums, their roaring laughter. They are feasting, deliberately, provocatively. The tantalizing smell of their roasting meats drifts over the walls on the wind, a cruel olfactory torment that makes your stomach clench with agonizing spasms. They know you are breaking. They are simply waiting for the final, inevitable collapse, for hunger to do their dirty work for them. It's a battle of wills, and your will is being systematically eroded. You find yourself meticulously examining every patch of ground, every crack in the walls, searching for the slightest hint of green. Your vision, though often blurred by weakness, is sharpened by this desperate hunt. You identify different types of weeds, mentally categorizing them. This one might be edible. That one is definitely poisonous. It's a terrifying lesson in applied botany, learned under the most dire circumstances. Your life depends on it. The communal spirit of the early siege days has completely evaporated. Each person is an island, focused solely on their own survival. Arguments are not just common, but brutal, physical altercations over the smallest perceived advantage, a slightly larger root, a better patch of moss. The veneer of civilization has worn thin, revealing the raw, desperate animal beneath. You see the cold, calculating look in others' eyes, a reflection of the same ruthless pragmatism growing within yourself. You recall stories of desperate defenders boiling their own leather belts and shoes, trying to extract any semblance of nourishment. The resulting concoction was vile, but it filled the stomach, if only with indigestible fibers. You've seen it with your own eyes now. The castle's few remaining horses and donkeys had their leather harnesses stripped and boiled. The very thought of it makes you gag. But the hunger, that relentless beast, pushes the disgust aside. Scholars often argue about the effectiveness of such desperate measures. While consuming indigestible fibers like bark or leather might provide a temporary feeling of fullness, they offer virtually no nutritional value and can actively harm a starving digestive system, leading to blockages or further dehydration. These were not solutions, but rather prolongations of agony, delaying the inevitable while inflicting further suffering. As night falls over Castle Blackwood, the cold intensifies, biting through your threadbare clothes. Your body shivers uncontrollably, a constant tremor that reflects the severe caloric deficit. You lean against the cold stone of the parapet, your eyes scanning the enemy lines, no longer searching for hope, but for an end to the torment. You know, with grim certainty, that the castle's desperate search for plants and roots is unsustainable. The land within the walls is picked clean. The next stage of the besieged diet, the one you dread most, is now unavoidable. The ultimate taboo, the one that whispers in the darkest corners of your starving mind, is about to become a grim reality. The unyielding grip of starvation has tightened its hold on Castle Blackwood, squeezing the last vestiges of strength and sanity from its inhabitants. The gnawing ache in your gut has given way to a profound hollowness, a desperate, churning emptiness that feels as though it might consume you whole. Your body, now skeletal, moves with a profound slowness, each step a testament to sheer agonizing will. The very air you breathe within these stone walls feels heavy, stagnant, imbued with the collective despair of thousands. The last of the castle's meager, unconventional food sources, the roots, the bark, the boiled leather, have been exhausted. Cook Agnes, once a vibrant presence, is now a silent, unmoving figure, lost to the depths of starvation. The kitchen hearth is cold, its embers long dead, a grim symbol of the life that has been extinguished within these walls. The only sounds are the occasional, labored breaths of the living, and the chilling, distant revelry of the besieging army, their feasting a cruel, mocking counterpoint to your agonizing hunger. You no longer dream of food. Your mind is too far gone for such luxuries. Instead, you drift into a fitful, shallow sleep, haunted by a pervasive sense of dread, waking with a start, your heart pounding against your ribs, only to face the same brutal reality. Your throat is perpetually dry, your lips cracked and bleeding, and the taste in your mouth is metallic, sickening, a constant reminder of your body's slow decay. Water, you rasp. But even that precious commodity is now rationed to the barest minimum, barely enough to wet your tongue. The castle's soldiers, once proud and disciplined, are now broken, their once imposing armor hanging loosely on their wasted frames. Their weapons feel like impossible burdens. They stand guard not with vigilance, but with a vacant stare, their minds consumed by the singular, overwhelming torment of hunger. The enemy outside, fully aware of your condition, has grown bolder, their probes against the walls more frequent, their taunts louder, promising mercy and food in exchange for surrender. The words are a powerful lure, a siren song against the gnawing emptiness. A common historical fact about sieges is that the conditions often deteriorated to such an extreme that defenders considered, and sometimes resorted to, desperate acts of cannibalism. While often shrouded in secrecy and rarely explicitly documented due to the immense societal taboo, instances of consuming human flesh have been reported in the most dire and prolonged sieges throughout history. However, a lesser-known detail is that these acts were almost invariably a last resort, driven by a primal survival instinct when all other food sources were utterly exhausted and often committed by individuals in the throes of madness induced by starvation rather than a collective decision. Historians still debate the true frequency of such events, as victorious armies sometimes exaggerated accounts to demonize their defeated foes. You find yourself watching a small, huddled group of villagers in a remote corner of the courtyard. Their movements are furtive, their eyes darting nervously. You see them huddling over something indistinct, but the air around them carries a strange, unsettling odor, something vaguely meaty, yet utterly foreign. A cold dread settles in your stomach, a feeling far worse than hunger. Your mind, despite its starvation-induced fog, begins to put the pieces together, and the implications are horrifying. This is the ultimate taboo, the darkest corner of human desperation anthropophagy, the consumption of human flesh. The very thought sends a wave of revulsion through your emaciated body, but then the persistent, agonizing hunger pushes it aside. Your mind rationalizes, twists, distorts. It's just meat, a source of calories, a way to survive. The moral compass, once a steady guide, spins wildly, corrupted by the primal need for sustenance. This isn't just dark, you think, your voice a rasp in your own mind. This is a whole new level of disturbing. You recall the whispered tales from other sieges, stories dismissed as morbid fables of mothers consuming their own children, of soldiers preying on the dead. These were the monsters of old, the extremes that humanity could descend to. Now, you witness it, or at least its terrifying implication, with your own eyes, within the very walls that were meant to protect you. The line between human and beast, between civilization and savagery, has not just blurred, it has been annihilated. Lord Edmund, gaunt and spectral, appears on the ramparts. His eyes, sunken and haunted, sweep over the starving populace. He knows, he must know, the scent, the hushed whispers, the desperate, vacant eyes of those who have already crossed that line. He offers no condemnation, no punishment. His silence is a heavy, terrible acknowledgement of the unspeakable reality that has descended upon his castle. He is the lord of a tomb, and his people are slowly becoming less than human. His burden is immense, the weight of their descent into barbarity pressing down on his already broken spirit. The bodies of the dead, once treated with reverence and buried in the consecrated ground of the castle chapel, are now accumulating faster than they can be interred. The grave diggers, themselves weakened by hunger, can barely manage their grim task. You see some of the more desperate individuals hovering near the chapel, their eyes drawn to the covered forms, a silent, terrible question in their gaze. The very concept of sanctity, of respect for the dead, is dissolving under the relentless pressure of primal need. Scholars still debate the specific psychological states that lead to cannibalism in besieged populations. Extreme caloric deprivation can lead to cognitive impairment, psychosis, and a complete breakdown of social norms and moral inhibitions, the act itself, even if it provided temporary physical sustenance, would have inflicted deep, lasting psychological trauma on survivors, haunting them for the rest of their lives. It represents the ultimate violation of human dignity and societal taboos. The enemy outside continues to taunt, their voices amplified by the silence of the starving castle. Surrender. We have food. We have mercy. They cry. The words echo within the hollowed halls of Blackwood, a tempting, terrifying promise. You see soldiers openly weeping, their resolve utterly shattered, wanting nothing more than an end to the agony, even if it means surrendering to a brutal enemy. The prospect of mercy, real or imagined, is a powerful antidote to the horrors within. You find yourself staring at your own emaciated hands, the skin stretched tightly over your bones, your fingers thin and trembling. You feel a strange detachment from your body, as if it is merely a vessel, a source of energy to be consumed. The thought, cold and unsettling, flickers through your mind. When will it be my turn? When will my body become a resource for others? The line between observer and participant blurs, and the horror of your situation deepens. The castle walls, once a symbol of defiance, now feel like the boundaries of a vast open grave. The cold wind that sweeps through the battlements seems to carry the whispers of the dying, the silent pleas for release. Your strength is ebbing, your body protesting every breath, every movement. The vision blurs, and dizzy spells become more frequent, more prolonged. You sometimes stumble, catching yourself on the rough stone, your knuckles scraping, but you barely register the pain. You remember stories, whispered in taverns, of sieges that ended not with a glorious charge or a cunning trick, but with the silent, horrifying capitulation of a starving garrison, men too weak to fight, their minds broken by the ordeal, opening the gates to their enemies, not out of treachery, but out of sheer, absolute despair. You wonder if this will be Blackwood's fate, a silent, ignominious end brought about not by blade or fire, but by the slow, agonizing descent into unspeakable hunger. The light from the enemy campfires across the field seems impossibly bright, a beacon of life and warmth that feels millions of miles away. You gaze at them, your eyes filled with a terrifying mix of hatred and envy. They are the fat, well-fed wolves, and you are the trapped, starving lamb. The very air around you feels charged with the presence of death, a palpable entity that watches, waits, and slowly, inexorably, claims its victims. As night descends upon Castle Blackwood, a silence falls over the castle so profound it feels heavier than stone. It is the silence of utter exhaustion, of despair, and of a population teetering on the edge of oblivion. The last unthinkable taboo has been breached. The human diet of the besieged has reached its darkest, most disturbing depths. There is nowhere left to go, no further depths to plumb. Only the end remains. The castle of Blackwood now feels less like a fortress and more like a mausoleum, its stone walls echoing with the hollow silence of pervasive weakness and the slow creep of death. The searing pain of hunger has dulled, replaced by a profound, pervasive exhaustion that permeates every cell of your being. You are no longer fighting hunger. You are fighting the very dissolution of your body. Your limbs feel heavy, your movements sluggish, and even the simple act of breathing requires immense effort. The last, desperate measures for sustenance have faded into grim memory. The foraging for roots and bark, the boiling of leather, the hunting of vermin, and even the unspeakable acts of anthropophagy, all have been tried, and all have proven insufficient against the relentless siege of starvation. Cook Agnes, and many others, are gone, their bodies adding to the grim tally of the fallen. The kitchen is a cold, silent monument to a battle lost long ago. You are acutely aware of the changes in your own body. Your hair is brittle, your skin dry and flaky, stretched taut over your protruding bones. Your eyes are sunken, and your gaze often drifts, unfocused, as if your mind is struggling to remain tethered to reality. Your muscles have atrophied, leaving you weak and trembling. Every breath is shallow, every heartbeat a slow, labored drum against your ribs. Your body is quite literally consuming itself, metabolizing muscle tissue for a desperate, fleeting burst of energy. Well, at least I'm losing weight. You might try to joke, but the thought is too grim, even for your own twisted humor. This prolonged state of extreme malnutrition has opened the gates to another, equally insidious enemy disease. Your immune system, starved of the nutrients needed to function, has utterly collapsed. A common cough becomes a rattling wheeze that shakes your entire frame. A minor cut festers into an angry, weeping sore. Every small ailment now threatens to become a lethal infection. The air in the barracks is thick with the stench of sickness, a potent mixture of unwashed bodies, stale air, and the acrid smell of fever. A common historical fact about medieval sieges is that disease and epidemics often cause more casualties among besieged populations than direct combat or starvation alone. Conditions conducive to disease such as extreme overcrowding, poor sanitation, contaminated water sources, and severe malnutrition leading to compromised immune systems created a perfect breeding ground for illnesses like dysentery, typhus, and scurvy. However, a lesser-known detail is that the psychological stress of a prolonged siege also played a significant role in weakening defenders' immune responses, making them even more vulnerable to infection. Historians still meticulously study siege accounts to differentiate between deaths from combat, starvation, and various diseases, often relying on symptom descriptions that can be ambiguous. You see the signs everywhere. Dysentery, the dreaded bloody flux, is rampant. Men, too weak to reach the latrines, soil themselves in their bunks, spreading the illness further. Their bodies are racked with uncontrollable diarrhea, leading to rapid dehydration and electrolyte imbalance, accelerating their demise. The smell is overpowering, sickening, adding another layer of misery to the grim tableau. You try to avoid the affected areas, but there is nowhere truly clean, nowhere truly safe within the castle walls. Guess the plague's having a party, you might grimly observe, if you had the energy. Then there's scurvy. The lack of fresh vegetables and fruits for months on end has taken its toll. Your gums are swollen, bleeding at the slightest touch. Your teeth feel loose. Old wounds, long healed, begin to reopen, weeping blood and pus. Your joints ache with a deep, bone-weary pain that no amount of rest can alleviate. Small bruises blossom into large purple welts with no apparent cause. Your body is slowly, visibly falling apart. The lack of vitamin C, a seemingly minor deficiency, is proving to be a silent, devastating killer. Lord Edmund, now a spectral figure, walks the wards of the castle infirmary, his face a mask of profound agony. He witnesses the ravages of starvation and disease firsthand. He sees children whimpering their last breaths, soldiers coughing up blood, their eyes vacant with fever. His orders are no longer about defense, but about futile attempts to comfort the dying. He knows, with chilling certainty, that his castle is being defeated, not by siege engines or enemy swords, but by the invisible, relentless army of sickness and hunger. His silence is a testament to the depths of his despair. The enemy outside seems to sense this internal collapse. Their taunts are no longer just about food, they are about sickness and death. Your Lord starves you. Your Lord lets you rot. They shout, their voices carrying clearly across the quiet, death-haunted fields. They know the castle is a charnel house, a breeding ground for demise. They are simply waiting for the inevitable, for the last gasp of resistance to fade, for the castle to surrender without a fight. You pass by a group of soldiers, once strong and vibrant, now huddled together, shivering uncontrollably despite the heavy cloaks. Their skin is pale, almost translucent, and their eyes have a glassy, distant look. They mutter incoherently, their minds clouded by fever and profound nutrient deficiency. Some of them are plagued by strange, unsettling visions, their reality distorted by the relentless deprivation. The line between sanity and madness has blurred, then vanished entirely. Scholars still debate the specific psychological effects of extreme malnutrition in medieval populations, while conditions like delirium, apathy, irritability, and hallucinations are well documented in modern starvation studies. Precisely identifying them from historical accounts is challenging. However, it's clear that the cognitive and emotional decline would have severely impacted the defenders' ability to mount an effective defense, even if they had the physical strength. The castle's defenses are now barely manned. Sentinels sway on the parapets, their eyes closed, their minds lost in a feverish haze. The watchfires, once diligently maintained, often burn low or go out entirely. The gates remain barred, but it feels like a hollow gesture, a pathetic attempt to maintain an illusion of control. The enemy could likely breach the walls with minimal effort now, but they simply wait, allowing disease and hunger to do their work for them. You find yourself plagued by a pervasive, itchy rash, your skin breaking out in angry red welts. Your body is rejecting itself, reacting to the toxins building up in your system, the result of organ failure and relentless malnutrition. Your limbs swell, painful and heavy, making every movement a burden. You struggle to pull your worn boots on, your feet too swollen to fit properly. This is the body's final, agonizing protest against the forces consuming it. The children, those few who have survived this long, are little more than skeletal forms, their life force almost extinguished. Their mothers, themselves on the brink of death, cradle them, their own bodies too weak to offer comfort or sustenance. The infirmary is full, the dying stacked side by side, their weak whimpers and labored breathing filling the oppressive air. You avert your gaze, unable to bear the sight. But the images are burned into your memory, a permanent scar on your soul. You remember stories of the Black Death, of entire towns wiped out by invisible plague. This feels similar, a silent, internal plague, but one born of deprivation, rather than a specific contagion. The castle is not being attacked by a single, distinct disease, but by a multitude of opportunistic infections, each preying on a body already pushed to its absolute breaking point. It's a slow, agonizing descent into chaos and death. The taste of blood is constant in your mouth, from your bleeding gums and cracked lips. Your vision blurs frequently, and sometimes you see shimmering heat hazes where nothing exists, or hear faint, phantom sounds of music and laughter, quickly replaced by the grim reality of the dying. Your senses are playing tricks on you, a cruel byproduct of your body's utter collapse. You are losing your grip on reality, slipping into a feverish delirium. As night falls over Castle Blackwood, the cold bites deeper, chilling you to the bone. You huddle in a corner of the barracks, listening to the labored breathing of your comrades, the occasional cough, the distant, mournful cry of a woman. The light from the enemy campfires is still there, a mocking beacon in the oppressive darkness. But you barely register it now. Your world has shrunk to the agonizing confines of your own dying body, a desperate fight against the inevitable. The castle of Blackwood is a husk, its once proud defiance reduced to a silent, agonizing vigil. The pervasive weakness in your limbs has deepened to a near paralysis, each breath a shallow, rattling gasp. You lie in the barracks, huddled with your few remaining comrades, listening to the labored breathing that fills the oppressive air. The acute pain of hunger has faded into a dull, constant ache, overshadowed by the overwhelming exhaustion and the insidious crawl of disease through your ravaged body. The last of the castle's unconventional food sources are long exhausted, the grim memory of bone meal and boiled leather now overshadowed by the more immediate horror of rampant sickness. Cook Agnes and countless others are gone, their emaciated bodies added to the growing piles of the dead. The silence within the castle walls is profound, broken only by the occasional cough, a soft moan of pain, or the distant mocking revelry from the besiegers' camp. Their fires, once a symbol of their sustained cruelty, now seem to dance with a sickening joy, their very existence a taunt. You are vaguely aware of the physical changes in yourself. Your skin is stretched thin over your bones, almost translucent. Your hair is sparse and brittle. Your gums bleed constantly, a metallic taste ever present in your mouth. Your vision blurs frequently, and the world often tilts and sways, a dizzying hallucination caused by profound dehydration and nutrient deficiency. You struggle to focus, your mind a foggy landscape of fleeting thoughts and desperate cravings. Is this what dying feels like? You wonder. A detached curiosity in the face of inevitable collapse. Disease, the silent killer, stalks every corridor of Blackwood. Dysentery, the bloody flux, is now an epidemic, its ravages visible in the widespread weakness and the constant stench of bodily waste. Scurvy, with its bleeding gums and aching joints, has incapacitated many, rendering them too weak to even stand. Feverish coughs echo from every corner, a sign of widespread respiratory infections, preying on immune systems utterly ravaged by starvation. The castle infirmary, once a small room for minor ailments, is now a massive, overflowing charnel house, filled with the dying, their bodies twisted in agony. A common historical fact about siege warfare is that the defenders' morale was often meticulously monitored by the besiegers, who sought signs of weakness or impending surrender. This included observing the frequency of patrols, the dimming of castle lights, the lack of activity in the courtyards, and even the sounds or lack thereof emanating from within the walls. However, a lesser-known detail is that besieging forces sometimes engaged in psychological warfare by deliberately parading their own abundant food supplies or sending heralds to shout tempting offers of food and relief. Knowing that hunger could break a garrison more effectively than any battering ram, historians often analyze primary sources for clues about these less tangible aspects of siegecraft. You hear the constant, taunting shouts from the enemy outside. Surrender. Dogs. We have bread. We have wine. Your lord lets you starve. The words pierce through the fog of your mind, a cruel, enticing melody. The temptation is immense. The thought of a full stomach, a warm bed, an end to this agonizing torment is almost unbearable. You see other soldiers, their eyes wide and desperate, looking towards the gates, their resolve utterly shattered. Mutiny hangs in the air, a palpable, dangerous tension. Lord Edmund, a spectral figure himself, still walks among his people, though his steps are slow and heavy. He carries the weight of thousands of dying souls on his shoulders. His voice, a mere whisper now, tries to offer words of encouragement, but they ring hollow against the backdrop of pervasive death. He knows the end is near. The choice is between a bloody, hopeless last stand or a surrender that might, just might, save the few remaining lives. His gaze is often fixed on the distant horizon, a desperate, fading hope for a relief force that never materializes. You cling to the faintest flicker of hope, the possibility of relief. Perhaps Lord Reginald, whose lands lie to the south, has gathered an army. Perhaps the king, informed of Blackwood's plight, has dispatched his own forces. You conjure images of cavalry riding over the hills, their banners snapping in the wind, scattering the besiegers like chaff. It's a desperate fantasy, a last mental refuge against the brutal reality of your entrapment. You whisper prayers, begging for intervention, for a miracle. A compelling, yet often overlooked, detail of medieval siege relief efforts is their immense logistical challenge. Even if a friendly army was raised, the sheer difficulty of gathering supplies, moving large numbers of troops, and coordinating a surprise attack against an entrenched besieging force often meant that relief arrived too late, or not at all. Furthermore, besiegers often set up outer rings of defenses to prevent relief forces from breaking through, making such attempts incredibly costly and frequently unsuccessful. This highlights why starvation was such an effective siege weapon, as it exploited the inherent difficulties of external intervention. The enemy outside, however, shows no sign of leaving. Their siege engines remain poised. Their archers still patrol the perimeter. They are patient, knowing that time, disease, and hunger are their most potent allies. They continue to send small raiding parties to test the castle's weakened defenses, their reports confirming the utter collapse of the garrison's strength. They are simply waiting for the fruit to ripen, to fall into their waiting hands. You see your fellow guards, once robust warriors, now little more than walking corpses. Their armor hangs loosely. Their faces are gaunt, their eyes glassy and distant. Some simply sit, staring blankly, their minds gone. Others murmur incoherently, their conversations a jumble of half-formed thoughts and feverish delusions. The once strong bonds of camaraderie have frayed under the relentless pressure, replaced by a desperate individual struggle against oblivion. The sheer apathy that now grips the castle is perhaps the most terrifying symptom of all. People no longer protest, no longer cry out. They simply exist, their energy so depleted that even complaint is beyond them. The silence of the dying is deafening, a profound testament to the ultimate defeat of the human spirit when pushed beyond its absolute limits. You feel this apathy creeping into your own mind, a tempting lure of nothingness, an escape from the endless torment. You recall the whispers of potential surrender. The enemy offers terms safe passage for the women and children, mercy for the soldiers, provided they lay down their arms. The thought is tempting, a lifeline thrown into an ocean of despair. But then you remember the stories of broken promises, of massacres disguised as mercy. You remember the honor of Lord Edmund, his unwavering defiance. But what is honor in the face of utter annihilation? The question torments you. A moral dilemma amplified by starvation. Scholars often argue about the ethics of surrender in medieval sieges. While prolonged resistance often led to harsher terms if the castle was eventually stormed, e.g., the right for besiegers to plunder and kill, early surrender could also lead to broken promises and massacres. The decision to surrender was agonizing, a complex calculation of immediate danger versus long-term survival, often with little reliable information about the enemy's true intentions. The air in the barracks is heavy, thick with the stench of sickness and the pervasive, almost tangible, presence of death. You shiver uncontrollably, your body racked by fever and cold. Your muscles twitch involuntarily, a sign of the severe electrolyte imbalance caused by chronic dehydration and malnutrition. You can feel your heart laboring, each beat a struggle, a desperate attempt to keep your failing body alive. As night descends upon Blackwood, the cold seeps into your very bones, a chill that seems to emanate from within. You close your eyes, no longer dreaming of food, but of silence, of release. The distant enemy campfires flicker, their light a mockery against the crushing darkness within the castle. You know, with a chilling certainty, that this is the final, agonizing chapter. The castle is broken. The defenders are dying. The disturbing diet of a besieged castle has reached its horrifying climax. All that remains is the end, whatever form it may take. The agony of starvation had reached its apex in Castle Blackwood, stretching the human body and spirit beyond all conceivable limits. Your own limbs felt like lead, your mind a hazy, feverish dream of phantom tastes and agonizing thirst. The castle, once a symbol of defiant strength, was now a tomb, its inhabitants ravaged by disease and consumed by an emptiness that echoed in every silent corridor. The sounds of the besiegers, once a taunt, were now simply a distant hum, your world having shrunk to the confines of your own dying body. Then, a shift, a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the rhythm of the siege. You hear it first, not with your ears, but with the subtle tremor of the stone beneath you. A distant rumble, stronger than the enemy's siege engines, but different. It grows, steadily, until it resolves into the distinct, exhilarating sound of hoofbeats, and then, faintly, the blare of trumpets. Not the enemy's mocking calls, but a different tune, one that stirs a forgotten spark of hope deep within your desolate heart. A common historical fact about sieges is that relief efforts, when successful, were often coordinated to arrive at critical moments of defender desperation or to exploit weaknesses in the besieging army's lines. This often involved a daring approach, sometimes under the cover of darkness or through difficult terrain, aiming to surprise the besiegers and break their blockade. However, a lesser-known detail is that even successful relief efforts often arrive too late for a significant portion of the besieged population, who had already succumbed to starvation and disease. The sight of a relief army, while a morale booster, didn't instantly cure the widespread malnutrition. Historians still meticulously piece together the timelines of various sieges to understand the precise impact of relief operations. A collective weak murmur rises through the castle. It's a sound of disbelief, then dawning, fragile hope. Lord Edmund, a gaunt shadow of his former self, is somehow on the ramparts. His eyes, though still sunken, now hold a flicker of something akin to fierce determination. A relief force, the whispers spread, carried on weak, raspy breaths. The enemy outside, caught off guard, their taunts replaced by shouts of alarm, scrambles to respond. Their campfires, so recently a symbol of their power, now reflect a sudden, chaotic panic. The battle outside is a blur of distant sounds, the clash of steel, the roar of men, the thud of arrows. You can't see it clearly, your vision still hazy, but the sounds are undeniable. The familiar, rhythmic thud of the enemy's catapults ceases. The taunting shouts are replaced by desperate cries of their own. It's a symphony of chaos and, against all odds, a symphony of victory. The besiegers are breaking. Hours later, though time is still an abstract concept, the sounds of battle recede. A new silence falls. But this one is different. It's the silence of exhaustion, of the immediate threat lifted. Then, You hear it the creak of the great castle gates, a sound that hasn't been heard in months, now slowly opening. A rush of cooler, cleaner air flows into the castle, carrying the scent of fresh earth and damp leaves, a welcome change from the pervasive stench of sickness and decay. Figures, strong and well-fed, enter the castle. They are not the gaunt, desperate faces you've grown accustomed to. They are soldiers, their armor gleaming, their faces grim but determined. They are the relief force. Their eyes widen in horror as they witness the scene within Blackwood, the emaciated bodies, the rampant sickness, the profound silence of a population brought to the brink. It's a moment of stark realization, a chilling tableau of what prolonged siege truly means. They bring supplies, not vast quantities at first, but enough, small, carefully measured portions of porridge, thin but warm, made from freshly milled oats, boiled vegetables, soft and bland, designed not to shock your starved system. The smell, though simple, is overwhelmingly beautiful, a fragrance of life itself. You try to swallow, but your throat is so constricted, your body so unused to food, that it's a difficult, painful process. Yet, the first spoonful, bland as it is, feels like a miracle, a profound act of salvation. Lord Edmund meets with the commander of the relief force, his face etched with both relief and profound sorrow. He recounts the horrors of the siege, the unspeakable choices, the terrible cost. The commander listens, his face grim, understanding the depths of despair to which Blackwood had descended. The castle is saved, but its people are broken. A compelling, often overlooked aspect of post-siege recovery is the extreme caution with which food had to be reintroduced. A starved body cannot simply gorge itself. Doing so can lead to a dangerous condition called refeeding syndrome, which can be fatal. Early medieval relief efforts, lacking this medical knowledge, sometimes inadvertently caused more harm than good by offering too much food too quickly. This meant that even after relief arrived, the suffering of the besieged continued, albeit in a different, more medically complex form, requiring careful and slow renourishment. Historians sometimes debate how much this refeeding syndrome contributed to lingering sickness and mortality after sieges were lifted. Over the next few days, the castle slowly begins its agonizing journey back to life. More supplies arrive: grain, dried meat, even some fresh produce. Healers from the relief force tend to the sick, though many are too far gone to save. The bodies of the dead are finally given proper burials, their silent forms no longer haunting the living. The stench of sickness slowly begins to dissipate, replaced by the faint, comforting aroma of simple, cooked food. You, too, begin the slow, arduous process of recovery. Your first few days are a blur of weak sips of broth and the blandest of gruels. Your stomach cramps violently, protesting the sudden introduction of food. Your body aches, a constant reminder of the ordeal it has endured. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, a tiny spark of strength begins to return. The dizziness lessens, your vision clears, the metallic taste in your mouth fades. The trauma of the siege, however, will linger. You will never forget the gnawing hunger, the desperate search for roots and insects, the chilling consideration of the unthinkable, the images of the starving children, the gaunt faces of your comrades, the silent despair of Lord Edmund. These will be etched into your memory, a permanent scar on your soul. The taste of bone meal, the smell of boiled leather, the musky tang of cooked rat, these will haunt your palate long after your belly is full. Scholars still debate the long-term psychological and physical effects on survivors of prolonged medieval sieges. While immediate physical recovery might occur, chronic health issues, psychological trauma such as post-traumatic stress, and a permanent alteration of one's relationship with food and safety were likely common. The experience would have fundamentally changed individuals, leaving them with an indelible mark of extreme human suffering. The castle walls, once your prison, now represent your salvation. The enemy is gone, routed by the relief force, their siege broken. The land outside begins to heal, the tracks of siege engines slowly overgrown by grass. But the memory of what happened within Blackwood, the depths of human desperation, and the disturbing diet that allowed you to survive, will forever be a part of its history. You will never look at a piece of bread the same way again. Every meal will be a blessing, a reminder of the time when food was not a commodity, but a desperate, agonizing struggle for survival. The experience will forever shape you, a grim testament to the fact that when pushed to the absolute brink, humanity's will to live can lead to truly unthinkable lengths. And you, the survivor of Blackwood, carry that chilling knowledge with you, a silent, enduring testament to the disturbing diet of a besieged castle's inhabitants.